Welcome to everybody. Tonight, our expert is Kevin Felmley, who is from my neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, and he is an expert on retirement tax strategies using SD IRAs and just general tax strategies to maximize wealth, which is something we all want to do. So, Kevin, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit
Thank
about
you.
yourself, and then we'll just let you get rolling?
Yeah, sure. I'm here in central Pennsylvania, as Hillary said. Um, I'm a recovering landlord for the last 23 years. That's how I got started in the real estate and have two daughters in college. Just enjoy meeting people and talking about this type of stuff. It sort of started out as a hobby. Now take it to some bigger and better stuff here versus just a hobby. But yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun.
Awesome. So, hit us with it. Give us some strategies for growing tax-free wealth.
Okay. So, the good and famous disclaimer, this is entertainment purposes only. Please contact your own attorney, accountant, or tax professional with any specific questions you have related to your personal situation. Um, I have no special training or certification or degrees or whatever in this, so please consult those individuals that can give you good legal and tax advice. So here's my agenda. I'm going to get to five different strategies that I've used to do Roth conversions. And this is sort of a topic that doesn't get talked a lot about. Um, but before that, I want to lay some groundwork. And if you're sort of new to self-directed IRAs and so forth, I'm going to throw in a little high level overview of some of the ones that I really like and just give you a couple reasons why. And then we'll dig into those five strategies that you can use to convert to a Roth. And then at the end, we'll do a Q&A. If you have any questions in the meantime, just sort of jot them down or throw them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end for sure. Talked a little bit about my background. I started as a landlord in '02. Just started buying rental properties here in central Pennsylvania. I've always managed my own portfolio. I've been doing that for since '02, and I'm starting to sell most of them. I have a closing on Friday on a single family house, and then I think next Tuesday or Wednesday I have a settlement on 6 units. So I'm starting to sell the portfolio and move into a little bit more of a passive strategy. And that's where I began in 2020. I don't do anything active anymore. I don't have a full-time job or even a business anymore. So I pretty much just focus on doing private lending. I started that in 2018. Took a little bit to get some traction, and then next thing you know, it sort of grew into a little bit of an animal. So I'm doing some things with my lending business now as we speak, building a website and so forth. But I do participate in a lot of syndications. I think I have currently about 11 or 12 active right now. And then they could be anywhere from note funds, car washes, self storage. I've several in multifamily. The next to the last one, I did a 1031 exchange into gas and oil mineral rights, which was pretty unique. I didn't know you could do that. So I did a little research and found out that it would actually qualify as a 1031. So I did that. My last syndication in 24 was commercial. It's actually a shopping center in Texas, and it's going to be a really good asset. We're not even a year into it, but the numbers are just going to be really, really good on that asset. So I'm excited about that. Unfortunately, he has a really strict buy box, so he only finds maybe one a year. So it's when he gets one, you got to jump on because there isn't too many of them. So I'm going to just assume a few things throughout. I'm going to assume people know the difference between an accredited and non-accredited investor. Also, I'm going to assume most of you are interested in alternative assets versus like the stock market. So if you are heavily interested in the stock market and you have no interest in alternative assets, this is probably going to be very boring for you. So just a forewarning. And then I'm going to assume that some of you have some type of experience with self-directed IRAs, whether you have them and you invest with them or you know of them and understand sort of what they are and so forth. So these are the accounts that I manage personally. I have four Roth accounts, a health savings account, two Coverdales for my daughters, which I'm pretty active in those because they're in college now. And then I have one inherited Roth and then a solo 401k that has two different buckets to it, a tax deferred bucket and then a Roth bucket. So that alone keeps me really busy just working those accounts. And then this sort of just happened organically. I have friends and family that sort of reached out to me in the last 3, 4 years and saw what I was doing and said, hey, could you teach me how you're doing all this stuff? And I said, yeah, sure. So next thing I know, I have 7 people in my lending deals with me that are using cash. That's sort of what I call a non-IRA money. Is I refer to that as cash. And then I have about 18 self-directed IRAs for lending partners, and I try to keep their money working for them in deals as well. So with that, that's pretty much my full-time gig is just keeping this money moving on a regular basis through lending deals. So with private money lending, I really like it because it's a lot safer and lower risk than some of the other investments out there, like wholesaling or flipping or what have you. And I also like it because it's a great option to do between syndications. So if the money's sitting idle for a while, like maybe the market doesn't dictate a lot of purchases right now with syndications, I like to keep it working out as a self-directed IRA and use it to do lending where I get, my co-lenders usually get between 9 and 12% returns. I make a little bit more because obviously I'm working the deal for them. And then just my other focus is helping others through private lending. And that's a great option for people that are non-accredited to get a double-digit return. Um, so that's my number two objective. And then, like I mentioned before, alternative investments and syndications when they come through. Once the IRAs grow and get to a balance where I can actually work them, I will put them in there. And some of my self-directed IRAs that I work, the account holder is not a accredited investor, so I can never put them in syndication, or at least I'm limited on which ones. So they're the ones that I typically have to keep working, like my daughters, my mom, and I have some friends that are just not accredited investors that I work their money. So I usually just keep them in private lending deals. So you probably know this, but I'm going to give a little bit of background on why I shifted to tax-free entities probably about 6, 7 years ago. I sort of figured, went to some conferences and got my ears bent on some of these things. So I was like, wow, this is a great way to do it. But you probably heard this before, but taxes are going to be your number one expense. You can add everything else up, but it comes down to your taxes, especially if you're a W-2 earner, because if you're self-employed or even in real estate, obviously you're going to get some more tax advantage treatment because of being a business owner. So I like to show this illustration. Question for you: what would you rather have, Hillary, $1 million or a penny? Most people are going to say, sure, Kevin, I'll take the $1 million, which I would have to agree. Sounds better. But how about the magic penny? This is one that doubles every day for 30 days. So if you look at this chart, obviously day one, that penny's worth a cent, 2 cent, day 3, 4, 8, 16, just keeps going. And then it gets down around day 27, starts getting traction. by day 30, it's worth 5.3 million and some change. And that's the value of compounding interest, compounding your money. So this is a graph, shows the same thing. You can see there on day 28, that magic penny with compounding effect surpasses the $1 million. So here's a twist. We're going to throw the same scenario in there, but throw tax in. And this is just for illustration purposes. We're going to use the 30% capital gains tax. You can see to the chart, day one, obviously you got a penny. Day two, you still have a penny. Day three, 2 cent goes to 3, 5, 8, much, much slower. Get down to day 30, you're left with $48,000. So with taxation, you're at 48,000. Without taxation, compounding, it was like 5.3 million. So big difference. And this is the illustration that I saw years ago, and this is what really struck with me to invest in tax-free entities. And this is almost like, this is why I like self-directed IRAs. It's almost, you can create it sort of like a 1031 exchange, do an investment, it comes back in, and then you go out and do the investment again, and you don't have that loss for the tax portion that was taken out. So you're reinvesting that full investment that was earned. And just like a 1031 exchange would do that. So I'm not sure who quoted this one time. I saw it, but taxes are the number one wealth killer. And I think we see that why here. So let's dig into a couple of these self-directed IRAs that I like. And I think personally, everyone should have one. The first is the health savings account. To be eligible for an HSA, you basically need a high deductible health plan. And now in 25, they are much, much more popular than they were even a few years ago. So it's a lot easier to get one, but that's really the only eligibility besides age. You can't be in Medicare, receiving Medicare, but other than that, you can obtain one. And I like them, some of these different factors I'm listing, there's a lot more, but these are some of the biggest things. Is one is you get a deduction for your contribution. So it almost acts like a traditional IRA where you can take that deduction for your contribution, but it also acts like a Roth IRA where your growth is tax-free and your distributions are tax-free. So you got the best of both worlds with the tax-deferred account and then by the deduction and then growing tax-free. And then the next one here, you can stockpile your receipts. This is the only IRA that this rule pertains to, where you can use this account, this IRA account, as a forced savings plan. And the way I explain this is, think of it, you're incurring the medical expense in 2025, but you don't have to take a distribution from the health savings account in 2025 if you want to claim that medical expense. So this could be a copay, it could be contact lens solution, whatever. There's a lot of things that qualify for this. So someday down the road, could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you could say, hey, I wouldn't mind having a chunk of cash come back to do whatever with. You can actually do a distribution for expenses that you incurred 5, 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of people don't realize that, but it just acts as a forced savings plan. And that's one of the main reasons why I really like this vehicle, is because of that aspect of it. And then another little thing that people don't realize is you can do a one-time rollover from a traditional IRA into this account. And since we're talking about moving money from a tax-deferred account to a tax-free account, this is very relevant, because if you have a health savings account and you have a traditional IRA, you got to take advantage of this one-time rollover clause in the rules. It's limited to the annual contribution, but it's free money. So think about it, you're moving something from a tax deferred status to a tax free status with no tax consequences at all. So it's free. It's a great thing to do to get started. And it's good seed money too. So I did a little research a couple months ago because I started thinking about my own health savings account, how it's not quite as large as I would like for it to be. So I did a little research on the average person, what they're going to spend on medical expenses over a lifetime. And you can see the breakdown here on the screen, but that's my goal, is to get 450 to 500K in my HSA by the age of, in the early 60s, because that's going to act as my lifetime or my long-term care insurance or any type of long-term expenses that I might have for me or my spouse. That's my goal, is to really grow this thing and try to never have to pay a medical expense ever again out of my pocket. Um, that's my strategy. All right, so number two, the inherited Roth. And when I put these in order, this is no importance of order. It's not like the HSA was number one. This is just a list of several that I really like. But the inherited Roth is awesome. Um, and really, the reason it is you can take a distribution from that Roth no matter what your age is. So the Roth rules for your own Roth IRAs, you have to be 59 and a half to take a distribution without tax consequences. But an inherited Roth, you can take it immediately. So it's almost like a vehicle to do investments in, to quickly get tax-free income. Another thing that most people don't realize is you can obtain one of these from anyone. Just because it's called an inherited Roth does not mean it has to be a family member. Does not have to be a family member. It could be a neighbor. It could be, a good friend, whatever. Um, I'm going to probably start doing classes on the inherited Roth, because I could probably spend 45 minutes just talking about this and the strategies behind it and so forth. I just wanted to highlight it here tonight. There is a 10-year rule with the inherited Roth that came out a few years ago, that you have to deplete that account within 10 years. But I don't really mind that, because I'll just get another one. They're, between family members and so forth. So it's not really that big of a deal for me. I'll definitely be able to work with that. But the issue that I find with some of my friends that have inherited Roths is they just don't have the time or the deal flow to work them properly. So I find it's a really big need in this aspect. So I'm going to probably create a training program where I can train people on how to do deals with a small IRA to grow it. Because if you inherit one, maybe it is small, maybe it only has $10,000 or 15 in it. So obviously you can't do a whole lot with 10 or 15. So there's some strategies to do that as well. And I'll probably do some type of class in the future on that. So the third one is my solo 401k. I absolutely love the solo 401k versus the IRAs. Um, Really, because I am the trustee of that account. I don't have to have a custodian, if that makes sense. And the reason being is the solo 401k with the IRS falls under an employer plan. It's not an IRA. It's not under the personal IRA rules. So there is some difference in rules with the solo, but they're actually better. They're actually better than the IRAs. So it's a great way to do it. And you can roll over any tax deferred account into a solo 401k. So a traditional IRA can be rolled over into a solo 401k. And we're going to talk about that in some of these different strategies here in a minute. So let's talk about Roth conversions. Um, what we're doing on a Roth conversion is we're moving money from a tax deferred status to a tax free status. Okay. And ideally, you want to do this with an asset, not cash. So the issue we have is people typically will have large deferred accounts due to SEP IRAs and old 401ks from employers. And what I found working with people is the large or the deferred accounts are typically much larger than the tax-free Roth accounts just because of this reason. So they usually have like a big fat, deferred account, and they know someday that they're going to have to pay taxes on that. So that creates a huge tax burden during retirement because when you take a required minimum distribution, they are taxed as ordinary income. Okay. And then you pay taxes the year you convert and on the amount converted. So that definitely creates a huge tax burden during retirement age. So here's some questions I came up with. I think there's like 9 that you want to ask yourself even before you do a Roth conversion. This is like a consideration type of thing. And I'll just go through these, not really much explanation because they're pretty self-explanatory, but just ask yourself, what's your current tax bracket? If there's a particular year that you're have a lower tax bracket for whatever reason, that would be a great year to do a Roth conversion. And then will my income drop later? So in the financial world, you'll hear a lot of people say, well, you know, um, build your tax deferred account. And then when you go into retirement, you're going to make a lot less money. So you can pay the taxes then because you want to have as much income. That, unfortunately, like for my case, that's not going to work because every day my wealth, my long-term income is just growing. I have tenants paying down my properties. I have my mortgages getting lower. I have my properties that are appreciating. So I'm not going to ever be in a lower tax bracket or something like that. So that's not going to work. Another thing to consider is your asset allocation or growth potential. If you understand the rule of 72, how long it takes for your money to double. Do you have your self-directed IRA sit for long periods of time at the custodian? And then if you do, what's your blended rate of return with that? So I have a lot of people that in my circle that do private money lending like I do, but they may only lend for 6, 7, 8 months a year. Then that money sits idle for 3 or 4 months a year. Well, yeah, when it was out working, they were getting a great 12% return, but then when it was sitting, it was getting zero. So their blended rate of return may not even be double digits for that year. Or do you have access to huge deals? Like, are you a deal junkie and you're constantly buying properties or whatever you're doing? You might be able to grow that IRA really quickly. So yeah, you'll want to do a conversion. And then ask yourself about your duration. What's your current age? How long do you have to work it before you're going to need that money? Another one that people don't consider is charity. Do you like to donate a lot of money or tithe to your church, so forth? You may want to keep some of that money in a tax deferred account so you can pass it on to the nonprofit because they won't pay taxes on it like you would. So it's just a good tax strategy to consider for a conversion. And then another thing is to consider is the stealth tax issue. So by converting one year and having a higher tax bill, will that push you into a new tax bracket? Then will your Social Security be taxed? Or will it create a higher premium for your Medicare? So you have to ask yourself that. And then simply, do you even have enough of cash to pay the tax on that conversion. If you convert $100,000, do you have enough cash to pay that tax bill? Um, for your estate planning and legacy planning, what's your heirs tax brackets? If you're planning to give your money to your kids and they're in medical school, so they're going to be high earners, mm, you may want to convert so they don't have to pay the tax because they're going to be in a higher category tax bracket. And then lastly, are you an accredited investor? Because that's going to limit you on some of the options for one of the asset classes that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So these are different questions you want to ask yourself. So let's get into some of the strategy. But I do want to mention that every time I did a Roth conversion, I've never converted traditional IRA to Roth. It's always been done in my solo 401k. And I'll talk about that here in a minute, but it was much, much easier to do, but it can be done in a traditional IRA. Personally, I think I don't really like traditional IRAs. I would rather move them into a solo 401k and then work them. So that's just my strategy. I got rid of all my traditional IRAs probably about 3, 4 years ago when I created my solo 401k. And this same process would work with a SEP IRA because that's a tax deferred. At least the older ones are. Now they do have a Roth component of the SEP, but going backwards, most people could only contribute into a SEP with a tax deferred status. So I would move traditional IRA to your solo 401k first, then convert it to a Roth. And this is a mistake that unfortunately I've seen people make. They do the conversion in their IRA to a Roth, and then down the road they're like, oh yeah, I'd like to create a solo 401k. Well, they can't move that Roth into the solo 401k. And something to take away and just peel it in the back of your mind is Roth conversions can never be reversed. So once you do it, it's done. So if you do it in the wrong sequence, it can sort of come back and bite, backfire a little bit. That's why I like to move everything into the solo 401k first, then convert it to a Roth. Passive losses can't be used to help offset the tax burden from a conversion because it's treated as ordinary income. So one or two little quick strategies you could do is, if you're in a year where you could, claim real estate professional status, or if you have losses from a short-term rental, something like that, you could help. That could help to offset some of that tax issue on the conversion. So let's talk about these 5 conversions here. The first one I'm going to talk about is actually cash. And when I created this slide set, I did this for another group in February, another investor group. This was before the stock market really went down. And just in the last couple of weeks, with the stock market went down, this would be a great time to do a conversion because I think it's going to come roaring back in a few years. But so here you're actually converting cash, not an asset. And you could do this in your solo 401k. You could even tie your solo 401k to a brokerage and still do a conversion if it's like in stocks and bonds and so forth. And also crypto. I didn't mention crypto, but when crypto drops, usually does have big drops and then it seems to come back. That's a great time to convert. So what do you think of when you see this picture in your mind? So obviously like a gutted building, bare building. I like to call this the gutted building strategy. So sometimes when you're rehabbing a property, if you ever do a lot of those, you'll find that a lot of times you have to make the property worse before it can get better. So let's just say you're adding a lot of square footage to the property. You have to gut it and rip down drywall and so forth, that's a perfect time to do something like this. You just have to sort of know ahead of time because you're going to want to purchase this in a traditional IRA capacity, and then do it with the thought process of you're going to convert this to a Roth. So this would be one sort of a unique property, like a burnout. You could do something like this with, say, hey, this would be a great one to do in my IRA and then convert it. Because once you get that appraisal, it's pretty black and white. You know, as soon as that appraisal says, hey, it's worth, 60,000, that'd be a good time to convert, especially if you paid 100 for it, something like that, convert it. Now you're at a 40% discount. The third strategy, and I've done this before, if you have a non-performing note, unfortunately, I guess you can make lemonade out of the lemon, but if you have a note, then unfortunately it goes non-performing. That's a great time to convert because that note's probably going to be worth 20, 30 cents on the dollar. So you could convert that at that point and then hopefully get it performing again, and it would go back up in value. So then the fourth method, and I've done this before, it's called a preferred member LLC. And I actually did this with some financial friends. We did it for the sole purpose of doing a Roth conversion. So it's an LLC created four members, and some of the members have a disproportionate balance of shares, and they have illiquidity. So those two things, illiquidity and disproportionate of shares, has creates it just creates a discount, and that's tax law. And we're going to look at the fifth strategy here in a second. That even gets more in depth of that, but you could still do the same process with a preferred member LLC. So the fifth one, and I've done this multiple times, and this is if you're doing a lot of syndications and anything with a private placement memorandum, this is a great way to do it, a private equity investment. So the investment must have no liquidity, and typically you get a 20 to 30% discount for no liquidity, meaning you get into the say a syndication with Hillary and Ian, and a month later you're like, oh wow, I'd like to get that money back out because I found something better. Well, fortunately, you can't. You committed to it, so there's no liquidity, and it's written, in that paperwork. So that, and then also no control, typically based on the gift and estate tax law, shows that you have a 20 to 30% discount on those two things. So examples would be a syndication, a debt fund, private placement memorandum, even something that you don't get a pref payout for 2+ years even helps that appraisal value to come down. And this is all possible through the gift and estate tax law. Again, back to the illiquidity and the control reduces the tax value of the investment. And this is done every day with estate planning and estates where people inherit stuff. They typically never pay dollar for dollar of the value of that property for whatever reason. And that's how this strategy sort of created right in with that. So the next slide will show sort of the process here when you want to do this, and the sequence of this is very important as well. You want to obviously fund this in a traditional tax deferred account, and then use the date that the fund or deal stops taking money and have it appraised immediately, because the longer you're in the deal, the closer you are to liquidity and control. If that makes sense. So that's why you want to have it appraised immediately as soon as that fund stops or stops taking money. And then as soon as that appraisal comes back, you'll want to convert to a Roth. And this is much easier to do in the solo 401k, as I mentioned earlier. So let's just put some numbers to this. Let's just say you do a typical $100,000 investment in your traditional IRA tax deferred account. The appraisal shows a 50% discount. Your conversion is $50,000. So you're going to get a 1099-R. You're either going to have to create it or you're going to get one, depending on if it's like a solo 401k or so forth. And that 1099-R is for an IRA distribution. That's going to show the conversion amount. And you're going to have to work with your custodian on this if it's with a custodian first, just so they know what's going on and what to plan for, and you can talk that through with them. So that's the amount of your 1099-R would be your 50,000. Something else to consider, you're going to more than likely have to get that asset retitled if it's in a traditional IRA or if it's in an IRA with a custodian. So like, say, for instance, you have your Roth or your IRA with Cama Plan, so it might say Cama Plan, FBO, John Doe, LLC, so forth. You're going to have to get that renamed from the traditional IRA into the Roth after the conversion happens. So you're going to talk to your operator about that because there was probably going to be a small fee to get that retitled as well. But again, this is no issue when doing it in a solo 401k. And the reason being is the solo 401ks, typically most of the ones that I do are in set up as a trust. And that trust gets a name that you give that name to. And that is the same name for the Roth account and the traditional IRA account. So you don't have to retitle anything if it's done that way. You don't have a custodian to work with. You can create your own 1099-R. It's so much easier to do in a solo than it would be with a IRA that's in the with a custodian. So for this one, number five, the equity investment, some of your challenges, and this is the big one here, is finding a competent and willing appraiser. The company that I used, I think they were out of California, they gave me a very professional appraisal, the paperwork that came back. It was about 84 pages long. They used the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. They had multiple certifications, the NACVA, and then she had the CVA. Very professional. And it even goes in there and shows exactly why you got those discount on the tax law and so forth. So it was just a really nice way to do it. And then the cost of the appraisal, you got to think of that. Mine ran like $1,500 to have done. So that's a factor. So if you want to convert, $20,000, maybe $1,500 isn't quite worth it. So you might want to go, find a cheaper way to do it, or wait till you have a larger amount to do the conversions from there. So the 1099-R is just consolidates the whole process with the IRS because that's what gets submitted. Another thing to factor in is you are married to that investment or that LLC for a specific, time frame. Because you think about one of the factors that allowed you to get the discount was the illiquidity. So you can't expect, to get an investment and get your money back in 12 months and get a good reduction because that's not how it's going to work. So you got to find a good solid investment because now that money is in a Roth account. So you want it to obviously increase in value because now everything that increases in value is all tax free now since it's a Roth. And then also, obviously, mentioned before, you got to be an accredited investor for certain private placements. So that's something to consider as well. So just a few things here. I like to coach and mentor people on creating these different things. I've been doing that. I am going to start doing lending small amounts to self-directed IRAs, which is sort of unique because that's to borrow money out of a self-directed IRA, it has to be a non-recourse loan, and I'm going to start offering them, small amounts, meaning maybe it's a short-term rental and someone needs money just to fund or furnish the rental. I can use a small IRA to do that to work it and so forth. And then if you're ever interested in private lending, I can help people out with that to maybe grow some small dollar IRAs and build some momentum with their IRAs. Below my email, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, not too active on LinkedIn anymore, but I should get more active on that, but I'm on there if you ever want to connect. And that's it. What kind of questions do we got?
That was awesome. We do have a few things in the chat, and I realized too that I never really introduced myself. I'm Hillary Graves, everyone. Thank you for coming. And my co-host Ian Schmidt is here. You mentioned a couple of times syndications, and that's what we do. We syndicate large multifamily properties. So it's crazy, like you're talking about all these SDIRAs and solo 401ks. I'm I would guess that half or more than half of my investors are investing through those entities. They're not just using personal funds through, or their, liquid funds through their savings account or something. And the process a lot of times takes a while. So I'm more and more interested. Keep hearing you talk about these solo 401ks. I've had people use those, but how can I, if you don't mind me asking the first question, how do you set that up? I know how people set up a self-directed IRA, but how do you set up a solo 401k?
So, and I didn't really talk about eligibility or anything for it. The rules for a solo 401k, just like the name explains, is you have to be a single employee of that business.
Okay.
So you have to have a legit business that actively tries to earn money. So, because it's an employer plan, so it gets tied to that employer. So you can't have employees. Your spouses can be on with you, but you can't have employees. So it works really nice for people that might have side gigs. Even if you have a W-2 job with a 401k, you can still be eligible for a solo 401k,
Okay.
which is nice. In the solo 401k, we didn't get into um, all the benefits of it, but you can put away, I think in 2025, like 70 some thousand, 76,000, which is great. Um, it's the only one that you can put that much in, and there's no restrictions on income. So if you make 100 grand a year or a million a year, you can still have a solo 401k, which is great. A Roth, even, because like a Roth IRA has income restrictions. So to set that up, I use a company. I'm not sure where they're based out of. I think out west. I use solo401k.com, the Neighbors Group, it's called, and that's who I use. It's like a $400 a year for the whole plan, which is phenomenal for the benefits of it. So you get a bank account, you have control over that bank account. There's no fees. And then they take care of all the docs for you. So if there's a change in the plan docs, they update them every year and so make sure everything's compliant and so forth. And they have an online program. So like I know Donna Mix on here. Her and I helped her set up hers a couple years ago, and she uses the same group. But yeah, that's how you get started, really.
Yeah, it sounds like the investing process is just so much easier with that. You don't
The
have
investing
all this
process is
back
much,
and
much easier.
forth with the custodian. That can be such a
Yeah.
head. Jeff asks a question in the chat. He said, "Is there any UBIT tax then on that?"
Yeah, I was referring to when you take the uh count and transfer it to the Roth, and then you're in I would assume a syndication that has debt on it then too.
So, um, no, not typically. That's something to ask your operator. I think if they're gonna the way they leverage it, but from what I've always was told, most syndications don't have UBIT. I'm not exactly sure if it's the way it's structured or what, but
Hmm.
most of them that I know of don't have UBIT.
Okay.
And that's another advantage of a solo 401k, Jeff, is UBIT is excluded from a solo 401k, which is great.
Another advantage to the solo 401k.
Hi, Kevin. I wanted to know, I noticed you mentioned at the beginning you have four, I think, Roths. Why would a person individually want to have four and not just one? Um, I have a family member who had a few as well. I'm just wondering why that is.
So those Roths are not all mine. So I have mine, my wife's, and then my two daughters.
Got it. Okay.
Actually, no, I take that back. My mom's and my one daughter. Yeah.
Why?
So, and the reason I'm working my mom's is it's strategy. 5 years ago, I learned about this inherited Roth thing, and I was like, oh, my mom's 85. So did a little digging, and she did have a traditional IRA, but she had no Roth. So I set her up for Roth for 1 year. She had some earned income, so she was eligible. And I self directed it immediately. And I put her in lending deals with me because someday I'm going to inherit that. So that's going to be my second inherited Roth. Um, I already have one that I got in 2022. And then I'm going to have another one from mom here whenever, whenever she goes. She's 90. She's just came from her today and she's still going strong.
Mhm. That's very smart of you, knowing that you're going to inherit one to be able to have the knowledge to do that, for what will be yours at some point. That's very, very smart. Um,
Yeah, you have to sort of have and
Absolutely.
understand it years ahead because
Yeah.
you don't want to figure this out and inherit the Roth 6 months later
Hmm.
because then you're probably inheriting a very, very small amount, maybe $1,000, whatever. And that's
Hmm.
really hard to work. I've done it. And I'll tell you, it's very, very hard to work, but sort of plan things out. If you have family members, a neighbor that you're close to, I'm working with a guy now. He's actually he's an investor. He's the power of attorney of his neighbor, and he's going to create a Roth for him.
Hmm.
Um, and he's going to start working it and growing it. So hopefully he can get something in there, some substantial money. So when he inherits it, it's a little bit easier to work than having $1,000 in it.
So you were saying that when a person, I guess, gets an inherited Roth, that there when you receive that inheritance, that there is no tax when you have to do the mandatory, or you can do the distributions every year. Is that correct? Because I think
Yep.
I know somebody who has to, take out at least once a year, but they're taxed on it.
The way I understand it with the Roth is there's no required minimum distribution with the inherited Roth because it is a Roth. So that's another good reason to convert it before that person passes because um, with a traditional, you do have to, if that person was required to take RMDs, then you're going to have to as well. And I don't want to take RMDs in an inherited Roth. I want that thing to grow. So at year 10, I might take a one lump sum and
Mhm.
just put that in my pocket and then use that for whatever. But the
That
way the process would work is you could do an investment deal and get paid back on that investment on Monday. Okay. That money goes to your custodian or solo 401k, wherever it goes into the account. You can then do a distribution immediately as soon as that payment clears, and you can do a distribution immediately and it's tax free. So that's, I have friends that do wholesale, they'll do like one wholesale a year in a Roth or inherited. They'll do like one flip per year. You got to be careful. You can't be going out doing 20 flips in it in a one any IRA, because now you're doing a trade or business in an IRA, and you can't be doing that. It has to be an investment. So a lot of strategy, a lot of rules to understand. It can be a little complex. That's sort of why I started helping people, because it's like sometimes they don't understand the rules and they think it's not worth it, but it is. Once you learn the rules and so forth, it's very worth it.
Yeah, I think it'd be really great for people to know, this, especially if they're going to, to inherit something. Sometimes people don't know about it until after the person passes away, and it's comes to you as it is. You can't
Yep,
do any foreplanning.
yep.
Can you quickly, just in short, explain the difference between a 401k and a Roth? I'm sure everybody here knows, except for it's just
Well, a 401k is a tax deferred account. So you're going to pay taxes on that when you want to do a distribution. A Roth is you paid the tax before your contribution. So anything, if your Roth has $50 in it and it grows to $60, that $10 gain is completely tax free.
so
And
so say
that's the reason why you want to probably move things from a tax deferred status to a tax free status.
so if a parent sets one up like a Roth and they have it for years, and then they pass away someday. So like say somebody's dad has one, they're paying on the Roth like per year taxes on it. So then someday when it goes to the child, they don't pay taxes on it when they receive that as an inheritance. Yeah?
If I understand you correctly,
Ugh.
no, because no one's paying taxes at all in a Roth, even the account holder, whoever, because you paid the tax on that income before you put it in the Roth.
Oh, got it. Got it. Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's no
Mhm.
taxes ever. It's not front loaded, and it's not, well, I guess you call it is front loaded because you paid it when you earned the income, you paid it. Yeah.
Got it.
But
Got it. Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Great question, Aaron.
Thank you.
Great series of questions, actually.
Sorry. I have
Yep.
questions about this, and I'm so glad he's here. Thank you, Ian and Hillary. I'm like, can I get some questions answered? Thank you.
Nice. I think Chris has got one, right?
Yeah, if you have a couple more minutes, I know we're getting close to the time here.
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
So okay, so in with a Roth conversion, let's say I got a chunk of funds in a traditional IRA, and I really appreciate what you just said about your conversion options. If I invested in one of Hillary's amazing syndications with traditional SD IRA, how like I don't have this is part of the reason I get the benefit of the discount because I don't have control. But the fact that I don't have control is this big machine over on the East Coast. I'm tucked up here in Alaska. Um, I put that money in there, and then I go hire an appraiser, and I say, "Hello, appraiser. Um, please appraise this property." And I have to mess up Hillary's world and the property manager's world and say, "Hey, this guy's going to come talk to you, appraise." I mean, how does that all work?
Oh, okay. Good. Great question.
I
Great
was wondering
question.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chris, the only thing that they use to do the appraisal is the PPM.
So
They
product
won't,
placement.
Yep.
What was
Memorandum.
Private place memorandum. They will not call Hillary. They won't call the property manager. They won't go out to the property and do a survey. They won't. They are praising basically the paperwork. Okay. So yes. So it's pretty simple. And the ones that I've done in my solo 401k, the operators never even knew I did a Roth conversion. Never. They never, they had
okay?
no clue.
Okay. So I, I invest in one of these in my traditional. I find an appraiser, pay maybe $1,500. And I actually right now I'm using Advanta for my self-directed IRA. I have a
Yep.
Roth with them, but I also have some traditional funds elsewhere. And you're saying that I have to do something, I don't even know what this like retitling or something that I'd have to do a little bit of fancy paperwork.
Yep.
Um, and like Advanta would be able to walk me through that probably.
Yep. Do you work with Alyssa Green?
That name does not ring a bell.
Okay. She's a great person there at Advanta. I don't have any accounts with them, so I'm non-biased, but I personally know her. Um, she's a good person to contact. She's been there for years. She knows what she's talking about. You could call her up, say, "Hey, this is what I want to do. What would be my process? What am I going to have to do for paperwork and so forth?" And I'm sure she'll be able to point you in the right direction.
You said
And
Alyssa Green.
just, yep,
Thank you. Thank you. And then,
yep.
so what would, I mean, I know you gave an example of like a 50% discount. It's not usually that drastic, is it? I mean, like I might make, like if I did one of these things that I'm talking about here through Hillary, and then I get the appraisal, which will show, my paperwork might show, hey, I invested X amount of money. Presumably the appraisal is going to come back and show that like I've already lost 30% or 40%. Like it's only worth this because of the discount on paper loss or, paper discount. Um, what's the usual discount?
So I've seen them anywhere between 30, and I think I've saw some the 60 before,
Okay.
but most of mine have fallen in that 45 to 50 category, the ones I've got back.
Wow.
Um, and the key is doing it right away. So when you send your money in or that syndication closes, bam, you send it to the appraiser. Um, and I would talk to them first ahead of time saying, hey, this is what I want to do. I'd even ask them, interview the appraiser and say, hey, have you done this before? Do you know what you're talking, does this make sense? And like my regular CPA, he wouldn't do it. He's like, no, he's like, that's out of my, and I sort of agreed with him because he didn't have any type of certification or anything like that to do it.
CPA
But I know
Schmipia.
there is some CPAs that will do them. Um,
Chris is a CP.
so
Yeah, I said CPA Schmipia. They're risk averse. They're whatever. And I can only discredit them because I am one. Um,
we
uh,
usually only make fun of lawyers, but hey, okay, that's all right.
hey, dude, I got a couple other quick ones. I think they're
Yeah,
quick.
fire away.
One solo 401k. There is no such thing as being creative. And like I've got a LLC with a couple few duplexes, right? And that's the LLCs only exist to house these duplexes. I can't somehow get creative and create a solo 401k like a real estate holding LLC, can I?
No, so and I was in this predicament a couple years ago. For that employer, it has to be eligible for a solo 401k. You have to have active income,
Okay, okay,
active.
all right.
So do something different. Go create another side hustle where you do consulting, you deliver pizzas, you do an Uber, whatever. But
And
don't
so
it can't be rentals. Yeah.
so let's say it's a really small side time hustle. What are the upfront costs to the paperwork, the documentation to create a solo 401k? Is that like
Couple hundred,
thousands?
couple $100.
Wow, okay, just okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Couple real quick ones on HSAs. I like what you were saying there. One, you said something about you can't do them if you have Medicare.
Yes. I didn't study this real close because I'm only 53, so I'm not rushing Medicare.
Right.
Um, if you're receiving Medicare, I think if you're 65 and you're receiving Medicare, you cannot contribute to an HSA, but you can still have one.
Okay. That
You just
answers that
can't you
problem.
just can't contribute.
Um, One-time conversion. And you said that it's the annual amount, which like that's 5,000 or something right now. Do you know what the amounts are right now?
I think of the family HSAs like up to 8,400.
Family for, okay. And then, so there is such a thing as a self-directed HSA, like you can manage your own funds in an HSA.
Yep.
Is that something that like, Advanta would, like a company like that would help me figure out or,
Yes. So typically your bigger custodians are the ones that offer HSA. So Advanta, I use Camaplan for my HSA. They offer it.
what's the name of that one?
Cama Plan, they're here in Pennsylvania.
How do you spell that?
CAMA and then PLAN plan.
Thanks. Okay. And then, for not a family plan, I'm a single guy, so whatever it is, 4 or 5 thousand bucks, one-time conversion from a traditional IRA into an HSA, pay zero tax, and then it's not a lot of money, but you've converted 4 or 5 thousand bucks into a forever tax-free account.
Yep. It's a great way to get the first year going, get the plan started because, if you don't have 5K laying in your pocket, then, this is a great way to do it. But I didn't do it my first year. I did it probably year three. I did the one-time rollover because I was like, I'm going to do it just 'cause I'm going to get it done. And
Yeah.
so, forget about it or whatever. So, yeah.
So last question: if I did something like that and had a small account, 5 grand, you talk about it's hard to work 1 grand. Well, you get a small account. What's the top one or two things you would do to try to work a small account?
So with private lending, how I do it is I'll I'll put my 5,000 in a lending deal with two or three other people. So if my lending deal's 100K and I have 5K, I'll try to find a couple other people that have 95,000. And then we all collectively do the lending deal together.
You
That's how
you
I
know
do it.
when you are dealing with new people, such as myself, you typically want to start with at least like 25 grand or so. Then you don't want to kind of bring on newbies at such a low amount, do you?
Yeah, anything under 25 is sort of hard to do.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I've been selling like partial notes to people like that have real small IRAs and are like, oh, Kevin, I just want to work this thing. How do I do it? I'll sell them a small portion. I'll sell them a percentage that they have money in their account to do. So at least they're working it versus letting it sit there. But the HSA and the Roth, if you put your annual contribution in, you can sort of, it's going to take you three or 4 years, but you'll start to get a nice little balance in there eventually. Um, and then there's a couple different strategies. If you don't, if you have access to deal flow and have the strategies, then you can work them pretty quickly. But if you don't, you may want to just keep them with a brokerage for a couple years, make your contributions, and then shift it over to a self-directed once you have something in there that you can actually put in a deal then.
Right, right. Kevin, thank you.
And I have friends, I haven't personally done this, but I have some friends that will create a multi-member LLC and they'll put in their HSA, their Roth, and their wife's Roth all in one LLC and use that to invest. So that's another strategy to do. And you can, if you're both accredited, you could even put that in a certain investment if you're, if you have enough of balance to hit the minimum, of what the syndication or fund requires.
Kevin, you're very interesting and knowledgeable, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks.
I enjoyed all those questions because I'm like, yeah, great question. Um, so Diane has one more question here in the chat. I think it's the last one, so maybe we'll conclude with this. Does leaving your Roth to your siblings in your will count as them inheriting your Roth?
Okay, great question. Because there's a big potential mishap with that question or that process. When you have a Roth, I don't care if it's with Fidelity at a brokerage or Advanta like Chris has with a self-directed IRA, you want to make sure on your beneficiary form for that IRA is filled out correctly of who you want to inherit, because that oversees, from what I've been told by attorneys, that oversees what your will says. So if they're contradictory, they're going to go by what's at the custodian. So you got to make sure that's correct. If they're correct and you're on top of that, you don't even need that in your will, because all they need to do is show a death certificate to the holder, the brokerage or wherever it is, and they immediately create a inherited Roth that's a specific, or inherited IRA. It's a specific account, and then make you the account holder.
Perfect.
So
So talk to
good
your
question.
elderly grandparents or parents. Talk to your elderly neighbors. Um, Amazing. No, this was so great. I'm already getting feedback. People are texting me and saying this is a great call. So this is a really great call, Kevin, and we appreciate all of your knowledge.
I
This has been
appreciate it.
awesome. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming. We are going to send out the recording as well. I saw Diane wrote something like that. We're definitely going to need the recording on this because I think there was a lot to digest too, where you kind of need to watch it back and try to really understand it and maybe then come up with some follow-up questions. So where can we reach you, Kevin, in case we want to get in contact with you?
Email is usually the best, because a lot of times I don't answer the phone if I don't recognize the number. So an email works real well. So
Well,
that one slide there has it, or it's KS Felmley at Comcast.net. So it's K as in Kevin, S as in Scott, my last name, which is FELMLEE at Comcast.net.
perfect. Perfect.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, geez, thank you so much. Thanks, Ian, for being here. Thanks everybody for coming. It's been great. We'll have to do this again.
Great
Sounds
stuff.
good.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Hillary.
You
Thanks,
bet.
everybody.
Kevin.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks,
All right.
Hillary.
Have a good night.
Everybody.
Bye.
See ya.